It's a wonderful opportunity tonight, and I'm very grateful for the chance to be here to talk with you about the exhibition here at the Pera Museum, Data's Entry. Before I begin, I'd like to thank the many people who have made this exhibition possible, beginning with my new Turkish sisters, Fatma Kılıçoğlu and Ulya Soley, who are the amazing curators that we've been so privileged to work with on Data's Entry. I'm really grateful for their amazing vision and support of my work, and for conceiving of a Turkish context for this project to begin with. I'd like to also offer my heartfelt thanks to Azayb Birol for his warm hospitality and crucial support of this project, as well as Aisha Bursala for her openness to fostering connections with the Anatolian Weights and Measures collection. I'd like to thank Pachu, the amazing designers, for both the exhibition design and the catalog design. And I'd like to thank everyone on the Pera team for all of their efforts in making this exhibition and all of these additional events like tonight's talk possible. In addition, I'd like to thank the beautiful and talented performers that I've been privileged to work with here in Istanbul, Ashli Bastanca, Melih Hirac, together with Pinar Akyüz. And I'd wish to thank the U.S. Consulate for their support in making this international exhibition possible. And last, but certainly not least, I'd like to extend my deepest gratitude to Suna Inan and Ipek Karac, as well as the Suna and Inan Karac Foundation for providing this extraordinary Turkish home for the first survey exhibition of my work. It's been such a pleasure and an honor to be here in Turkey, and I'm very grateful to all of those who have helped to bring us to this moment. As we've prepared this exhibition, a running joke has been how very difficult it is to translate many of my titles, which are English plays on words, into the Turkish language. And I'm told that the title of today's talk is no different. I've called it Optimized, Not Optimistic. I'm going to do my best to try to explain what I mean by that phrase and the conundrum that it evokes as I'm walking you through the various works in the exhibition. Along with showing you the works in the show, I'll be talking with you about some of the exhibition's main themes. So we'll be talking both about the process and the ideas behind the various artworks. I'll be moving back and forth between showing you some images and playing some videos, and I'll also be reading a little bit. And I'm planning to speak for about 45, maybe 50 minutes, and we'll have plenty of time for questions at the end. And I hope that if you haven't already, I'll be able to convince you to go on upstairs and see the exhibition for yourself firsthand. So, without further ado, what does this mean? Optimized, not optimistic. I believe that as a result of the digital, and specifically our reliance on data, which I'll be talking more about, our culture is getting increasingly optimized. This is to say that we are more efficient, more productive, more standardized, more integrated, more routinized, and more automated than ever before. Yet, I feel that this optimization is not necessarily cause for optimism. Why? Because optimization always incurs a serious burden that people, machines, and our environment must all share. This is a central concern throughout my work, and in many of the pieces in this exhibition, I attempt to show the burden of optimization as a physical weight that the body must bear. In the first work that I'd like to share with you, I'm exploring this notion of weight in a very direct way. As you may know, the Karac Foundation houses an impressive collection of Anatolian weights and measures, some of which are displayed here at the Pera Museum. As Fatma and Ulya and I were beginning the first discussions around planning this exhibition, I learned about this collection, and I came to realize that this would be a natural fit for a new project that at the time I was really just beginning to think about, extending my previous work on big data and taking on the issue of cloud computing. I created 3 new projects which are premiering in Data's Entry. They all seek to debunk the fantasy of cloud computing as being weightless and immaterial. Even though metaphors like the cloud suggest otherwise, I'm interested in showing how data, too, has weight. In my view, data is the latest incarnation of universal standards that begins with weights and measures. But I think that in today's data boom, standardization is perversely becoming all measure and no weight. So these new works try to restore weight to data's measure. The first of these, which you're seeing here, is called Cloud Profiles Weightless Measures. It's a site-specific intervention that temporarily occupies 4 of the video screens in the Anatolian Weights and Measures collection gallery. I'll play some of these short videos, so they'll be going on in the background while I talk about the project. Oops. There we go. Okay. In Cloud Profiles Weightless Measures, a figure partially engulfed by a digital cloud must assume unrecognizable positions to interface with it. The animations show a digital cloud clinging to and recontouring the body with residual virus-like data. The bodies themselves are digitally textured to appear like the stone and metal objects in the collection. Now, what's meaningful to me about the presence of data in our lives and the ways that we are optimized through data is the universal aspect of data. The idea that everything can be digitized today or rendered as data, which is what connects us to this collection of weights and measures. If we think back to weights and measures, these artifacts promise that we can live in an organized and just society because we are able to use the same standards universally. In other words, if everything can be counted, we can count on each other. I believe that data offers an updated version of that same promise, but one so extreme that it verges on something less like a promise and more like a threat. If everything can be counted as data, and if we are united as both the counters and the counted, then here's the question. What is left to distinguish between the data that constitutes me and the data that constitutes the world? This sounds like an abstract and rather philosophical question, but it's very important for understanding the dynamics that are reordering our world today. To take the example of data and identity, delineations between self and other may waver or get radically remixed. We see that in the wavering, clouded forms of these figures. Or to take the example of data and memory, we think that if we save something to disk, or better yet to the cloud, it will exist there as a reference forever. Of course, we have all experienced the heartbreaking betrayal of failed hard drives and unreliable cloud service, so we know that's actually not true. But data doesn't only affect memory around the past and storage. Its most powerful impact may be its predictive capacities. As the saying goes, the internet never forgets. But much more importantly, networked data can be mined in multiple directions at once. This makes the present, what we're living in now, only one possibility, contingent on many different futures. Actualized or not, predictive futures are stored no differently than memories of past events. So this is not merely a philosophical consideration. There are real applications like predictive policing and risk management in which we see data's forecasting capacity applied toward capitalist social control. To make these animations, I worked both physically and digitally. I started with 3D scanning a human performer wearing cloud forms that I made. So the process began with a human. Then in 3D animation software, those scans were rendered twice, once with a digital wireframe exposing the polygons of its structure, and again using photographs of real stone and metal to add a material texture inspired by the objects in the collection. In the animations, the figures are constantly shifting between these two non-human modes, the digital and the analog material. The next work that I'd like to show is the title work of this exhibition, a new performance called Data's Entry that I created for this context. Here are some images of this piece. In the performance Data's Entry, A performer must interact with an impossible interface covered in QWERTY keyboard keys, my symbol for data input. It's shaped like an overgrown capsule, something meant to enter the body, like a pill that you swallow. But the body is always confronted with it as an unworkable external surface, an object that's too big to swallow or hold in the hand. As the dancers slowly explore the affordances and constraints of this object as interface and try their best to create new relationships with it, we find that its scale confounds their efforts, and they are in a constant process of negotiation with this alien object. For me, the meaning of the title, Data's Entry, is that data reflects our bodies and has entered into our world as a presence we must contend with, as though it has a body of its own. Ironically, we know this without question in our bodily guts when data presses us into grueling repetitive tasks like data entry, and we find ourselves resisting. So here's a video to show a brief sample of their movement. This is 1.5 minutes. So one main theme running throughout my work is the push and pull between our experience of organic human bodies and our idealized dreams of inorganic machinic systems. This exhibition takes the approach of returning our focus to the laboring body, as in data entry, which confronts the tensions of optimization in settings of work. In these settings, human and non-human bodies collide in ways that are confounding and sometimes rebellious. My work involves not only the human body, but also the absent or missing human, the robotic body of the machine, and the transhuman body of automation. In Data's Entry, the performers move excruciatingly slowly to make the effort of work visible in their bodies. I'm influenced by the performance style of Japanese Buto, which as a form emerged at a moment of great technological upheaval after World War II in Japan, when technology had wrought unprecedented destruction with the bomb, as well as by choreographers like Jerome Bell or the Judson Church movement, who have explored exhaustion, effort, and pedestrian movement to counter the weightless virtuosity of classical dance. This performance and the exhibition as a whole aim to expose how being pressed into the service of a technology weighs us down. Throughout my work, I attempt to undermine the myth of Homo faber, man the toolmaker. This kind of thing. In science-driven cultures like ours, this myth is used to explain what makes us human. We are taught to believe that to be human is to be a tool maker. Humans are special because we uniquely create tools to bend the world to our purposes. But perhaps it is also the other way around. in our entanglements with tools, we serve them too. This connects to another very central theme in this exhibition, namely non-anthropocentrism, which means simply the belief that humans are not the most central entity in the world. Anthropocentrism, anthrocentric, right, is the kind of hubristic human exceptionalism that follows from Homo faber and has led humans to mainly engage with the non-human world in an exploitative way, resulting in all manner of crises, from ecological devastation to war. Instead, and in keeping with non-anthropocentrism's more modest stance, I advocate for human, non-human solidarities. What I mean by this is a respectful, collaborative, non-exploitative engagement with objects. This exhibition shows how, against a backdrop of universally laboring bodies, it becomes possible to find such new forms of sympathy and solidarity. One of the questions people often ask me is whether I think that robots and AIs pose a threat to humanity. But I think that this kind of anxiety is misplaced. It assumes that the core relationship between humanity and everything else is adversarial and competitive. But that's not the only possible kind of relationship we might have. My work aims to create sympathetic human-machine systems as a counterpart to coercive cybernetic systems. I'm interested in fomenting human-non-human camaraderie, a goal that is very much aligned with and indeed inspired by feminist ideology. So moving on to the next work, in a related sculptural work, Data Cloud, A Heap, a Mass, a Rock, a Hill, I again am working with the QWERTY keyboard, using the individual keys as a symbol for data input at a scale that defies human intention. Data Cloud presents a malleable mound of glistening keys that slumps heavily to the touch. In creating this work, I was inspired by the etymology of the words data and cloud. The word data first appeared in the English language in the phrase, a heap of data, in 1646. And by the way, I learned this fact from the data historian Daniel Rosenberg, who wrote one of the brilliant essays in the exhibition catalog, which I hope you'll have a chance to check out. I learned about the word cloud when a friend forwarded me a word of the day tweet from the Oxford English Dictionary. The OED is truly the bastion of the English language, so I found it rather brilliant that the OED tweets in the first place. And from this particular tweet, I learned that the word cloud dates to 9th century Old English. When spelled clod, kind of like clod, it meant a mass of rock or a hill. Today we imagine cloud computing and data as being immaterial, but data cloud, a heap, a mass, a rock, a hill, renders them physically as a mound of keyboard keys. To make this imagined lumpen interface, I attached over 6,000 reclaimed keyboard keys, one by one, with each key representing a singular input point or datum. En masse, they take on an analog dimension, becoming weighty, unwieldy, grounded, and in an important sense, they are senseless. The word data means the raw measurement of the world. The difference then between data and information is that data is just the numbers, unordered, before they get processed into meaningful information. I think of this heap as a pile of meaningless measure that takes on a certain weight. There's no meaning in this heap of data, only unordered, uninterpretable, symbolic bits. Data cloud and data entry are familiar but strange, kind of like the QWERTY keyboard itself, which was designed to be just unfamiliar enough to slow down the process of rapid typing, which tangled the keys of early typewriters, confounding typists who were too quick with the more intuitive alphabetic layout. In my discussions with Ulya, I discovered that Turks experienced a similar transition between the F and Q keyboard layouts used here in Turkey. Here is an image of another early typing interface, the Malling-Hansen writing ball, which was used by the philosopher Friedrich Nietzsche. Nietzsche dreamed of a transparent interface, a machine that would directly transcribe his thoughts, and he hoped that the writing ball would be that machine. Nietzsche was going blind, so he wanted to learn touch typing in order to continue to write without having to rely on his failing eyes. But, as media historian Friedrich Kittler tells the story, Nietzsche soon discovered that the writing ball was not the transparent interface he had hoped for after all. Changing how he wrote changed what he wrote. Once he started typing, Nietzsche's writing became much shorter, more telegraphic, and more aphoristic. He confessed, quote, "Our writing tools are also working on our thoughts." Like Nietzsche and like the data's entry performers negotiating their capsule, we experience the same thing when we try to condense our thoughts into the 140 character limit on Twitter. Or in a related example, as an extreme example that is, we can observe in the US presidential election that when political speech is carried out on a platform with such restrictions, it not only affects what can be said within that character limit, but also ultimately transforms politics itself. The next piece that I'd like to share is a robotic performance called Roomba Roomba. It presents a pair of robotic vacuums with potted rubber trees strapped to their backs, dancing to a karaoke backing track for High Hopes, which is a children's song made famous by Frank Sinatra. Roombas are intelligent robotic vacuums that learn how to navigate the space they're in to clean it effectively. Paired with the music, their algorithmic movements look choreographed and charismatic. When human audience members are in the space, their bodies change the room's contours. The Roombas then try to investigate, giving us the impression that they are alive, flirtatious, and social. So here is a short video of this interaction. Okay, so you can experience that for yourself upstairs on the third floor. Where are we? Roomba Roomba pivots on solidarities between natural and artificial, biological and machinic, behind-the-scenes service work and performative display. The song's hero, a little old ant, is a worker who manages to move a rubber tree plant through irrational aspiration and hard labor. This cheerful song and the notion that plants and machines are dancing and behaving socially seem playful, but the Roomba's performance also carries a darker message. The song High Hopes teaches children to overcome adversity by working as hard as they possibly can. Today, these traits make for prime neoliberal subjects. The ant has long been a symbol of the worker. In Roomba Roomba, the ant is recast as an even more perfect worker, a machine. In previous works, I've tried to perform a non-human machines process, but in Roomba Roomba, the machine performs what is traditionally humans' work, the gendered activity of vacuuming. Going back to the notion of human-non-human solidarities, this project makes an important case for the continuities between women's work and the robotic work of machines, both of which are often black-boxed or hidden from view. Whether performed by humans or machines, computer work, service work, and domestic work all share this cultural invisibility. I'm not only interested in making labor itself visible, but also in making visible that commonality as grounds for new transhuman solidarities. And in fact, historically, before computers were computers, computers were women. In the 1940s, a computer wasn't a thing, it was a job. So computers were people who performed computation. Bakers bake. Teachers teach. Computers compute. Computing was monotonous number crunching, a form of clerical work that was usually done by women, both because there were more women available to work during World War II, and because of cultural assumptions that women were more suited to this kind of mindless tedium, much like data entry. In fact, women were considered ideal computers from the late 18th century. So this slide shows women computers working on tabulating data. Here are two women computers working on the ENIAC machine, the first general-purpose electronic computer. And this incredible image shows a male programmer issuing commands to a female computer. This is very persistent imagery, which we see again in updated form, for example, in the 2013 Spike Jonze movie, Her. So my work recognizes this material historical connection between working bodies and the computer. Because one of the things that I'm most concerned with is the labor required for the techno-social processes that uphold digital culture to run. What these images show is that there is a direct feminist concern in the link between the invisible black-boxed labor of the machine and the invisibility of women's work. In addition to a feminist critique of technology with Roomba Roomba, I'm also critiquing the modernist colonial enterprise, and specifically slavery, as a supply mechanism to provide labor power. I consider how contemporary digital tools and gadgets are robots in the etymological sense, meaning forced labor. This is RUR, Rossum's Universal Robots, a play by Karol Čapek, which coined the term robot from a Czech root meaning forced labor, serf labor, or servitude. A common complaint of digital culture nowadays is to say we are slaves to the machine. But I'm also looking at how machines are slaves to us, and what that says about human ethics, especially when we humanize them in films like Her. When I presented an early version of the Roomba project at the University of Michigan, a student, Eliza Cadeau, gave a brilliant response to the project using the rubber tree as a point of departure. The rubber tree reminded her of cruel labor practices on Congolese rubber plantations. Belgian colonialists would cut off the hands of underproductive workers in order to force the most productive workers to work doubly hard to support their family members as well as themselves. Cadeau drew a connection between this form of slave labor and the dream of optimized hands-free labor sublimated today in the Roomba, which in this piece, nevertheless, bears the rubber tree as a burden. In fact, the conditions of optimized and automated labor show how humans and machines are united in work, requiring each other's support and opening the possibility of new forms of solidarity. For example, here is an image of the famous mechanical Turk automaton. The automaton was supposed to play chess on its own, but it actually required a human hiding inside to work on its behalf. Nevertheless, this supposed automaton toured the world until the hoax was revealed. Today, I'm very interested in how far we are from effective artificial intelligence and other forms of automation. The gaping disparities in AI systems are further proof of why solidarity with machines might not be such a crazy idea after all. A recent example is the personal assistant AIs that give users the experience of automation when, in fact, like the Mechanical Turk, the so-called AI is a group of real people desperately scrambling behind the scenes to maintain app-like real-time efficiency. Platforms like Go Butler, Clara, and XAI were intended to be actual AIs when they were first developed, but the technology was simply not good enough, so they had to hire humans to fill in. Amazon's Mechanical Turk labor market, named after the automaton, does something similar by hiring humans at micro wages to complete human intelligence tasks, or HITs, that machine intelligence still isn't great at handling. I find these examples from the realm of labor to be especially fascinating because they make a great argument for solidarity. Robots aren't so efficient that they are stealing people's jobs. Robots are so inefficient that they are forcing people to work as robots. The title and tagline of a Bloomberg Technology article about the personal assistant companies says it all. The humans hiding behind the chatbots, behind the artificial intelligence personal assistants and concierges, are actual people reading emails and ordering Chipotle. This is a clear-cut example of how optimization creates an added burden shared all around. The next project that I'd like to show is the installation E-Waste, a series of sculptures built from commonplace USB peripherals. Lorraine Rudin, a collaborator who has known my work for many years, once wisely described my aesthetic as neither new media nor old media, but middle-aged media. As she pointed out, most of the technologies that I'm drawn to in my work are things that are not necessarily obsolete, but they're on their way in that direction. These are technologies that exist now, but are something a mom might use. For example, the QWERTY keyboards that we're using now may soon be eclipsed by touchscreens as we more and more frequently conduct our computing on smartphones. These cycles of obsolescence inspired E-Waste. The point of departure for the installation is a science-fictional scenario. Plastic USB devices have survived an ecological apocalypse. Although they no longer have humans to program them, they are destined to work forever. Even as their bodies slowly become fossilized, they keep churning. This piece is called Prologue, and this is a special bilingual edition we created for this show. I'll read you the text to give you a sense of the narrative behind this installation. The factories finally grow so large that the planet can no longer support their weight. It starts with a simple sinkhole in Shenzhen. Eroded beaches pile onto deforested mountainsides. Slums crumble over condos, sloshed in ice cap runoff, and the continent slips. It isn't long before neighboring nuclear reactors are swallowed, and the inevitable rest is history. Soon, Earth is no longer habitable for humans. But what of all the gadgets those factories churned out, the always-on armies that once served the human race? Their plastic bodies prove impervious to eventual climate change and sudden catastrophe. Indeed, they hastened this. But without humans to program them, to direct their work and give them purpose, the devices persist in their empty routines. As years go by, the earth beneath them takes pity. The stony ground creeps toward the orphaned gadgets, embracing their fragile frames, to soothe and brace them for their burden of infinite work. E-Waste connects with several key themes in this exhibition. One is the seeming purposelessness of our empty productivity and hollow habits. E-Waste makes clear that the dark flip side of optimization and overproduction is the constant threat of disposability. To be sure, we are not only optimizing our machines, we are optimizing ourselves as well. In many ways, optimization amounts to narrowing that ontological gap separating Homo faber from his tools. Optimization makes ourselves and our machines more compatible in order that all things, human and non-human alike, can function seamlessly in overarching total systems. These optimized systems operate without distinguishing between components, biological or technical, human or non-human, organic or machinic. This means we need to ask, what are we optimizing ourselves for? I'm a consumer, and I certainly desire new technologies, but as I get older, I more and more frequently find myself dreading the upgrade. I'm exhausted by the process of obsolescence because it requires not only upgrading the technology, but also upgrading myself. With every new update, I too must be updated. I'm compelled to learn new skills, master a new system, cultivate new habits, when I'm not necessarily ready to give up my old ones. For example, I passive-aggressively tell software updates to remind me later for weeks at a time. Perhaps this procrastination is an outgrowth of my work on deceleration aesthetics. I use this term in my work to talk about ways that form, in an aesthetic sense of the word, helps us decelerate the compulsive and compulsory cycles of overproduction, consumption, and obsolescence that we all participate in, like it or not. E-waste puts the focus on digital cast-offs, the casualties of upgrade culture that didn't make the cut or got used for a while and tossed aside. I want to solicit sympathy for these gadgets because I see humans as being in an analogously precarious role. Just like a gadget with a singular function, many people who are trained for specialized work or limited by structural forces are cast aside and replaced when their jobs are no longer desired. All of this is to say that as quickly as we are depleting the environment, which is a very real concern, I worry that we are also depleting ourselves, and these are two symptoms of the same problem. The media theorist Willem Flusser once wrote, quote, "The human hand consumes culture and transforms it into waste." The human being is surrounded not by two worlds then, but by three, of nature, of culture, and of waste. It is a circle turning from nature to culture, from culture to nature, from waste to culture, and so on, a vicious cycle. In e-waste, and in the next piece I'd like to share, 3D and, I'm interested in how this cyclical malleability of categories undermines human intentionality. I think there are parallels between the contemporary compulsion to work 24/7 that's exacerbated by things like social media, where we ourselves are always on, and the idea that, like these devices, and like earlier robotic and colonial slaves, humans are disposable in a global digital economy of this scale. 3D and is a fossilized 3D printer that slowly and diligently produces scarab covers for a network of glowing USB mouses. This piece crosses the archaeological and the futuristic, digital and handcrafted reproduction, and animate and inanimate agency. I like to think that this piece gives us different approaches for thinking about time, which is another major theme of this exhibition related to deceleration aesthetics. On one level, 3D and is drawing a line through time, connecting the deep past and the distant future. I designed the scarab to reference an archaeological object like Egyptian artifacts from the ancient past. Yet when reproduced by the printer, performing as another robot in the gallery, these scarabs take on a futuristic quality, gleaming in the light of the mouse's twinkling LEDs. And because they can be reproduced endlessly, they call to question the notion of any origin point. The final scarabs even reference the absence of the human hand in that the sectional patterns of the 3D printer's layered excretions start to look like the arches, whorls, and loops of a human fingerprint. While the printer works, its motors call out a pathetic message, M-O-M-M-Y, D-A-D-D-Y, mommy, daddy, in Morse code. While the printer seeks its ancestors, the scarabs appear to be artifacts without origin. They are perfect futuristic digital copies of an imperfect handmade model from a forgotten age. On another level, the decelerationist aspect of 3D and affirms our present as we become engrossed in watching the printer's slow work. Time stands still while the printer works at a painstaking rate, defeating the promises of supposed rapid prototyping. So here's a short video, just 1 minute, to show this process. So the next piece I'd like to show is a video series called Modeling Big Data. In this 6-channel video installation, I parody how computer culture favors hoarding, overproduction, and excess. I perform as an obese data body, so stuck in the cycle of generating data that, like so-called big data, it has become swollen by its own data glut. I repeat an endless series of movements that are comically inadequate attempts to mimic common computer routines. I call these data gestures. Clicking, buffering, caching, and pinging. Just as e-waste critiques the overproduction of consumer tech gadgets, modeling big data focuses on the overproduction of personally identifiable data. When such information is data mined, it can be construed as a portrait of an individual, but a special kind of data profile that can be predictively, probabilistically forecast. In this way, and thinking back to the way that Nietzsche's keyboard changed his writing and his thinking, I believe that the much-hyped phenomenon of big data is changing our sense of self. This related work preceded Cloud Profile's weightless measures, but deals with similar ideas. Here, the overproduced profile is bloated beyond recognition, becoming the excess weight of the figure itself. There are 2 red scenes and 2 gray scenes in this series. The red ones, clicks and buffering, represent front-end data gestures that users experience. The gray ones, cached and pings, represent back-end data gestures that occur behind the interface's black box. Although many people think this series is computer-generated, all of them were created using very low-tech means, a combination of paper, foam, and myself as a performer inside these obese forms. I'll play one of the videos now as a sample of what you'll see upstairs. This is clicks, and it's just under 2 minutes. So, perhaps the opposite of humans being drawn into cycles of compulsory productivity is the next piece that I'd like to share, a single-channel video called autoresponder.exe. In this piece, I was inspired by email auto-replies, which we've all, if not used, then certainly received. Autoresponders are automated email scripts that send generic reply messages to incoming mail in lieu of a personally composed response. These messages typically say things like, "Sorry, I'm out of the office," "I'm away from my desk," or some other excuse. They give the illusion that a human is replying when in fact it's just a scripted machine. You're looking at the final image of the video, and I'll now play a portion of it. The video is 16 minutes, so this is a section from towards the end. So this video compares a scene of managerial power to this type of software that is impersonal, ineffective, and tone deaf. The image slowly scans, revealing a still photograph of an executive desk standing on end in a disheveled office. Like the bureaucracy itself, auto-response messages provide a shallow veneer of competence in corporate culture. They mask inattention, lapsed productivity, and bureaucratic redundancy. Although this is a high-resolution 4K video, which uses the latest video technology available, the video is very slow, and the image is revealed pixel by pixel, evoking primitive email load times for JPEGs. The image itself contains a dense iconography for masculinity and tropes of patriarchal power. All right, we're nearing the end here. The last work in this exhibition that I would like to share with you is, in fact, the earliest one chronologically. Primaries is a 3-channel video installation originally created in 2008, before I came up with the idea of decelerationist aesthetics. Yet it embodies many of the decelerationist themes in the exhibition, so I'm very grateful to Fatma and Ulia for their insight to revisit this work in the context of this exhibition. Primary sets human bodies into a machine's world where they are subjected to iterative movements and denaturalized conditions. The installation consists of 3 circular projections, rotating like slowly spinning discs that erratically gain and lose momentum. The room vibrates with sounds of churning fans and throbbing motors, while seemingly weightless figures move through contortions constrained by an ambiguous space. The editing is intended to counter their actions, working against expectations of gravity and impetus. Here's an excerpt mock-up showing all 3 channels at once. Okay, so I'm going to leave this playing. Primaries evoke specimens under a petri dish, embryos floating in amniotic fluid, or even the cycle of an industrial washing machine. However, it is unclear whether the exerting bodies are driving the system or being propelled by it. Primaries captures the ways that humans and machines are integrated into non-anthropocentric systems that don't prioritize human life. It shows the push and pull between weight and weightlessness and asks us to reconsider our relationship with time because the heightened materiality of these organic bodies seems to resist acceleration. The videos are shot in SD, today an antiquated video format. The color is intentionally pushed over the limit of what the SD video can handle, causing the image to partially degrade bit by bit. This connects to the failure of optimized systems pushed literally to the breaking point. Engineering missteps and design faux pas clog the arteries, litter the hallways, and cram the circuits of commercial desire. It is easy enough to despise the digital dross of so much junk culture, but insofar as we reflect ourselves in the products we create and love to hate, fabricating new technologies to overcome our human limitations, and retrofitting ourselves to accommodate their inevitable shortcomings, we engage in a cycle of mutual imprinting. And so we must ask, as we code ourselves into technology, bit by bit, what becomes of the ugly bits? Are they augmented along with the rest? One such ugly bit lurking in the dynamic of user-tool servitude is the possibility that our distaste masks residual class prejudice. Are not digital tools the inanimate, ununionized, exploited working class of global capitalist production, programmed to perform uncomplainingly in always-on 24/7 work weeks? Today's software and hardware legions carry out the modernist dream of robotic forced labor. High obsolescence rates betray our disregard for these machines, which in another world we might know as companion species. Though we are eager to accept their servitude, we are quick to discard them for a faster, stronger, newer model. Have we expanded slavery and its disposable corpus of mass labor into the object world? These would be questions for science fiction were it not for commercial cycles' unprecedented acceleration, which does not only collapse production and consumption, or merely garble labor and leisure. Today, there are no longer clear divisions between producer and product. When self is a product of media and consumed as media, we can see how our own selves as media are ripe for exploitation too, through digital profiling, tracking, tagging, and so on. When we too are media, the imperative to inculcate care for consumer technologies sounds only half funny. Thank you.